Welcome to our webinar this morning. It is entitled Disaster Recovery and Backup, How to Best Protect Your Data. And this webinar is being sponsored by the Building Industry Association, the North State Building Industry Association, along with Cloud First Technology Solutions in association with Microsoft. A little bit about myself. My name is Dennis Gentles. I am the CEO of Cloud First Technology Solutions. I've been in the IT industry for 20 years. I've been involved with many enterprise projects, helping large organizations such as Citibank and Lockheed Martin and JetBlue and organizations to standardize their IT environment. And there is quite a bit of information that I've gathered concerning backup and recovery and the importance of it, not only for enterprise organizations, but all organizations. The focus today will be on the small and medium-sized business, how to best protect your data and doing that. So this morning, the agenda is we're going to discuss how to safeguard your business, the importance of doing that. Why should I care about protecting my data? Well, the answer is obvious, but we want to dig a little bit deeper into that. Why would one want to protect their data and different ways to protect your data? And then we're going to talk about how technology can help you to do that. Some of the newer technologies out today, how cloud really helps a small and medium-sized business catapult themselves into another level where they can now have the same type of technologies that some of the larger companies have had for years. And really, once we understand this information, how do we actually get started? How do we put it into action so we can make it happen? So why do I need disaster recovery and backup? It seems that it may be difficult, or it may seem like it's something very expensive for a small company to implement. Maybe I only have a few employees, maybe just a couple of desktops. Why do I have to go through all of the changes and the effort to put a good backup strategy, a good disaster recovery strategy in place? Well, the numbers don't lie. 80% of businesses that suffer from a major disaster, they go out of business in 3 years. Whether it might be a major flood or a hurricane or whatever it may be, when a disaster strikes and our data is lost, it can send ripple effects through our organization. And the numbers say that 80% of such businesses, they end up failing, eventually becoming insolvent. 40% of 40% of businesses that experience a critical IT failure go out of business within 1 year. Companies that aren't able to resume operation within the next 10 days. If you're not able to take your data, get it back up and running, a server has failed and you need to get all of your information back up. If you're not able to do it within 10 days, you're not likely to survive. 31% of PC users have lost their files due to events that are beyond your control. Have you ever worked on a document that you've worked on for hours, and then something happens to the PC, or something happens and you lose your information? Or maybe you have a lot of documents on a local computer, on a laptop, and then the laptop is stolen, or it's lost, or something happens to it. It falls into a pool. Anything can happen. And if our data is not properly backed up, if we don't have a proper disaster recovery plan for our data, well, then we're at a loss. The catastrophe that most businesses experience is not really having a major disaster such as a fire, a flood, earthquake, but it's really something even more insidious. It's malware, having a virus come and attack our data. And so that's another part of disaster recovery and protecting our data, making sure it's protected against viruses, making sure it's protected against malware that can go in and infiltrate our files and corrupt it, or maybe even some of our data is stolen. So there's a lot to think about in this broad area of protecting our data. There's a lot to think about in terms of how we go about backing up, how do we go about putting together a disaster recovery plan, and how do we make sure our data is protected from malware. Well, what are the consequences of losing data? Well, of course, there's a direct loss of revenue. if our website goes down, or if our customer files are lost? How can we effectively do business? Really, our business is our data. Our business is the information that we have and being able to act on that information in order to use it. Whether we have architectural plans for a new building project, whether we have insurance data for our customers, whatever it might be. When that data is lost, how can we operate and how can we move on with our business? So it certainly creates a direct loss of revenue if our data is affected. Then there's the expense of paying for highly skilled technical people to come and try to recover that data in some way and try to get it back. There's a decrease in productivity. While our data is gone, our employees can't continue to work. There's nothing for them to do. The litigation can happen if there's breach of confidential information. Our customers can take legal action against us because their data got breached or somehow got lost as well. And then there's the adverse effects to our reputation as a company. Who wants to do business with a company that lost data or allowed confidential information to get leaked? So those are some things to think about when we are planning to make sure that our data is protected and it's not lost. So how do we go about doing that? How do we go about protecting our data and controlling our data? And how do we make sure that we're prepared for the unexpected? As discussed a little bit earlier, as was mentioned, one of the most exciting new technologies in the last few years, it's not so new, but it's something that is gaining much more traction, is the cloud. 90% of enterprise companies already use the cloud, but the major shift and the change in the way we do business is happening on the SMB level, on the small and medium-sized business, because now the cloud levels the playing field, giving technology that only some of the larger organizations had now available to an organization with just one person, an organization with just a few people. What is the cloud? Simply put, it's a marketing term, and it's the ability for us to use computers that may not be on premise, to use services and software and computing functions that are out in the internet someplace. And now with the ability to use the internet, we can access very specialized services and servers without it being on premise. We can access it on someone else's servers. So what does that translate to? Well, there's key business products or areas such as cloud servers and hosted phones and hosted applications and managed services. All of that is now available via the cloud. But primarily, and what we're talking about today, is how disaster recovery and backup relates to that. Well, what are some solutions for safeguarding our business? Well, some of the things that we want to be concerned about is educating ourselves on the topic of backup and disaster recovery. Being able to manage mobile devices, that's also extremely important when it comes to safeguarding our data. More often, organizations are adopting a bring your own device policy where an individual may have their own personal mobile phone, their own personal tablet, and they get access to company data. How convenient is that? The company does not have to pay for a bunch of mobile devices. They save money, and the employees are able to access the data on the go. But the danger of that is what happens when an employee separates from the company? Well, then they still have that data on their personal phone, and that's company data. What if they lose their phone? What if they lose their tablet? How can the company be sure that that tablet, that device, is protected so unscrupulous individuals won't have access to it? That's where the danger lies. And we're going to talk about that more. Then when it comes to just protecting our data in general, on our PCs, on our servers, what are some solutions for that? What about backing up? Backing up our files. We looked at the numbers that most individuals who on their personal computers, many individuals on their personal computers, don't have a backup strategy. Even some companies on servers don't have a backup strategy. I once did a consulting engagement with one company, a large company. They had over 2,500 employees with 40 locations all over the world. And they did not have a proper backup strategy in place, at least not one. They thought they had one, but it wasn't tested properly. And one day when there was some data loss, they lost years and years of emails that was needed for their organization, and thus that had some financial effects too for their organization. So even the larger companies need to, well, no matter what size our company is, we need to really look at what our plan is for backing up our data and making sure that plan is effective. And then we also want to plan for the unexpected. What happens if XYZ were to take place? What are we going to do? How are we going to have business continue? How's our business going to continue? How are we going to keep operating if a disaster were to take place? So when he talks about, when we look at mobile devices, we talked about the danger or the risk of having personal data, not personal data, but business data on personal devices. Well, there is technology out there that helps. Say someone on our team loses a mobile device. What can happen? Well, there is the ability to lock the device remotely and restrict it so that no one can get access to it. There's the ability to remotely reset the PIN on a mobile device. And there's the ability to remotely wipe all the data off. But what happens if it is a personal device that has personal information on it? The company has liability if they were to have access to a personal device and were to wipe someone's phone. Well, there is the ability to use technologies such as Microsoft EMS, and it allows you to, and there's other MDM solutions, which is mobile device management solutions. But in particular, there's a technology that allows you to take a container and place it on that mobile device. And inside the container, that's where the company's data is. And the company owns what's inside of that container. And if the person were to lose the device, or the person were to get separated from the company, left the company for some reason, then the company will have the ability to remove that container from their device, to lock it so that they can't get to the data, and that the data gets wiped off. Yet, all of the personal pictures and the personal files are still intact. So that is some of the solutions that are available, that's available out there, and that's something that a company may want to look into in order to better protect their mobile devices, because not only does it allow them to keep a bring your own device, a BYOD policy, but also has tighter control over what is happening with your data. It's the company's data, so the company would want to make sure that it's protected no matter what device it lives on. And no matter who owns the device, the company owns the data. So we want to secure what matters most. Another part of security and data and protecting our data is making sure that we have the right level of authentication or access. Once a person gets authenticated as to who they are, we want to make sure that the right level of access is available. So let's say a human resource manager is in the office and they have access to personnel files, they have access to benefit information, to resumes, and to personal data about the others in the company. So only the human resource department and that manager should have access to certain data. So making sure the level controls are in place is very important. And sometimes in smaller organizations, when the company first gets started, those control levels may not be looked at as closely. So part of protecting the data is doing an audit to make sure that only the people who need access to a certain type of data has access to that data, and no one else. The same was when it comes to sales. There's financial information that a salesperson may have access to, company information, clients, who are the customers of the company is, and sometimes that data can be confidential and should not be shared with others in the organization. So depending on what location a person is at, what device they may be using, a different level of security can be implemented. Now that may seem difficult to do, but once again, using cloud technology, there are some very simple ways to institute levels of authentication that can easily be managed. So those are things that a company may want to look at. Controlling access to business data. It's important for application and information workers to be able to access the data wherever they are. That is the growing trend of business today. Being able to work wherever, whenever, whether it's on a laptop or a mobile device or tablet, being able to get to your data and to be productive with that data. Being able to make a Word document, on the go, on a mobile phone. Being able to check what your customers are doing, or view your sales team from a mobile device remotely, not being inside of the office. Those are competitive features that more and more organizations are trying to get in order that they can have information to critical data so they can make decisions very quickly and to move forward with business. But again, that also brings up the topic of security. Having data so accessible means that it's important to have it, one, backed up, because now everyone is relying on that data to be accessed, and then two, to be protected, and three, to be protected. So we want to make sure that this data is set up in such a way that the sensitive data is kept on a server, it's backed up, and it's not at risk. When doing these things, when protecting our data and having a level of control, it's important to have simplified management of all of this. The cloud offers that. We want to take advantage of the ability to have a single platform, some easy to use tools, proactively managing our desktops and our devices. There are applications out there, the MDM solutions, mobile device management solutions, that we can put a policy in place and we can say that these type of persons have access to this type of data. We can put policies in place with our email where it's we can put it so that certain individuals can forward a document but others can't, or there can be information that is internal where we can email someone internally in the organization with some confidential information, but we can put policies on that email that says this email cannot be forwarded outside the organization. It cannot be forwarded to a personal email account. It can't. And we can also put information where what's inside of it, a policy that what's inside of that email cannot be copied. It cannot be forwarded. We can't use copy and paste. We can't take a screenshot of it. That type of technology is easily and readily available to help protect sensitive information. As well as tracking. We can look at who actually opened up the email and what they did with the email. A case study of the Huntington Beach Chamber of Commerce. They had 6 employees who worked remotely. They also worked inside of the office. And they had many issues where they had files at the office and they weren't able to work effectively remotely because certain files were at the office, certain files were with them on their mobile PCs. Being able to sync calendars. And so adopting cloud-based software solved that solution for them. They were being able to collaborate, work on files together, being able to remotely work on documents together. Someone may be at home, someone may be in the office, and they were able to get on the same document and work. And that also helped them to put a disaster recovery plan in place. One of the benefits of having a cloud-based server and a cloud-based solution is that all your data is in one place. It's very simple to back it up. Usually in a cloud-based solution, data is replicated more than one time. If you are primarily accessing servers that are based in one region of the world, many cloud solutions have it that data is replicated to another area of the world. So if there's a disaster, all of the data that you're using in the cloud is someplace else so that you can access it again if there is a geographic disaster. Microsoft is a leader in that. And they have all cloud data in a minimum in 3 locations. So let's take Office 365. If you have that, or you use it, or you're thinking about using it, Office 365 data is replicated 3 times twice in the geographic region and once in a region someplace else. And all of that is protected, and it's attached to only the company's user account, and no one has access to it, not even Microsoft itself. So we want to have automatic, always-on protection for our data in several ways. One is being able to safeguard our data against spam and viruses. And so being able to use virus protection technology, some of that is built into Windows. There is other organizations, other software vendors who give a higher level, I wouldn't say higher level, but a more granular level of protection against viruses, McAfee, Trend Micro. But having a virus protection software that on your servers, but also on each desktop, and being able to manage it to make sure that it's always up to date is something that is extremely important. There's the ability to safeguard our PCs and devices. There's a technology such as BitLocker, which encrypts our hard drive so that when we log in, the data is unencrypted. It's our username and password. And we can even add another level of authentication, like multi-level authentication, to get into our device. And once we're in, it opens it up. But if someone were to steal it and try to get access to that data without logging in, then it would be encrypted. They would not be able to read it. So depending on the level of security that we need on our data, that's something that we may want to look at as well. I mentioned multi-level authentication. That is the ability for us to maybe log into a device with our username and password, but then we need another level of authentication to get in. The username and password won't work by itself. Perhaps we get a text to our mobile phone with a code, and then we have to enter that text in. That's another level of authentication. Or perhaps we have to put our username and password and our fingerprint. That's another level of authentication. So having multi-level authentication is also a way to better protect our data. More and more organizations are under compliance. There are privacy and security standards that we all should have when it comes to our data, but then there is some that are dictated by compliance organizations such as HIPAA or PCI or SOX. Those organizations put a level of security. It sets a standard that organizations that are governed by those rules have to meet. So if we deal with credit cards, then we're under PCI compliance. If we are a medical organization, PCI, HIPAA, and if we are a public company, then we may be bound by SOX laws. So implementing that type of level of security on our data across servers that we may own or across our workstations in our office, that can sometimes produce, it can be very difficult to do at times, or it could be expensive to do at times, and sometimes hard to manage. Using cloud-based software such as Office 365 or other applications, other productivity suites, it makes it easier for us to institute the levels of security that can meet with industry standards, that can meet with the level of compliance that we're looking to gain. And it's much easier for us to manage. For instance, I talked a little bit about securing emails. In Office 365, there is a template that you pop the template in. There's a PCI template, there's a HIPAA template. Once that template is in place, then anytime someone sends an email that may violate a HIPAA standard or PCI standard, perhaps there's a credit card in the middle of an open email and it's being sent, it can be set up by the administrator to automatically stop that email from being sent, or at least put up a notification saying, oh, it looks like there's a credit card in this email. You might want to think about sending this email encrypted or not sending it at all, depending on what your company standards are. So those are some of the things that are easy to implement with some of the later technologies. Getting more down into backup and disaster recovery. Well, what are the differences? Well, with backup, what we're doing is that we're saving our files in a secondary location. In the past, individuals had to back up primarily using tape. They would have to purchase a tape backup machine and manage tapes. And every day there would have to be somebody who switched the tape out. Well, that can end up being a tedious task for an office manager or for those who are working in the office. So eventually an IT person takes that over, and having an IT person adds a level of expense to, especially to a smaller organization. And so that ended up being fairly costly, managing a tape backup solution. But then being able to restore the files, sometimes organizations realize that if they didn't constantly look at their backup strategy and test it out, that when a disaster did happen and we went to get the tapes, oh wow, we didn't check this tape. This tape is blank. It actually didn't back up on the day that it was supposed to back up a few months ago. Well, we didn't check it to make sure that it actually worked. And so those are some of the gotchas that sometimes happen that I've actually seen. So backup is making sure our data is in a secondary location and that it's sound and we can restore it when needed. However, disaster recovery is protecting our files and it's minimizing business disruption. Keeping a replica of our data on an online server so that we can access it very quickly, or getting our applications and services back up and running in just a few minutes. That's what disaster recovery is all about. So backing up our data is one thing. That's great. But what if it takes us 4 hours to get all of our data back, to restore all of our emails? Then we're down for 4 hours. And for some organizations, that's an acceptable period of time. But for some other organizations, being down for 4 hours can mean significant financial loss. And 4 hours is a short period of time compared to, perhaps some may be down for a day or two, trying to restore the data, trying to build a new server, get things back up and running. Disaster recovery makes it so that if a server goes down or data is lost, we can be back up and running in minutes. How can we do that? There is a case study or example of a firm. It's the law offices of Aaron Katzman, and they reported that they were able to they couldn't keep their growth going because of slow performance. They had to constantly go to restart their servers. They've had problems with productivity. However, one of the Microsoft partners worked with them, and what they did is they created a Hyper-V virtual server. And what that did was basically took the server that they had and virtualized it so that server could run on any platform. And what that meant was that having this virtual server, they could run it on premise, and if something were to happen to that server on premise, then it would automatically start in the cloud. And so someone may be trying to access data from the server. Something happens to the server, it's down. But the person's accessing the data don't realize that it's down because automatically in the background they get reverted to the same replica of data, but it's in the cloud. That is what true disaster recovery is about. And so that's something that this particular law firm put into place. And what they stated was during Hurricane Sandy, their employees were able to continue to serve customers from home. They were continue to operate, continue to work, and they didn't even realize that there was a system failure that had went down in the background. So one of the benefits of being able to use technologies that can replicate our servers or replicate our data is that we can deliver uninterrupted customer service. We're able to increase the agility of our IT, reducing costs, being able to run virtualized desktops, virtualized servers, where we can have things up and running. We can move things from data center to data center very quickly. It gives us much more flexibility with our data, as well as making sure it's protected. We never want to lose the files. never you lose your latest files or 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 our data if we happen to lose our laptop or our device. By having technologies such as OneDrive or Google Drive, um, the Dropbox, those are type of technologies that store our data in the cloud. Using OneDrive for Business from Microsoft allows you to integrate directly into Outlook, directly into your Microsoft Office applications, where when you store that data, well, then now your applications still have access to that data on whatever device you may have. I may be working on a Word document on my laptop, but I have to leave the office. I simply save it, it replicates to the cloud, and then I can continue working on that on my mobile device. In fact, when I open Word on my mobile device, it knows the last file I was working on, no matter what other device I was working on it with. So if I was working on it on my laptop, now I'm opening up my Word on my mobile device. It says, oh, well, this is the last file you were working on. Do you want to continue? And not only can I just quickly get to that file, but it will take me to the exact location where I left off in my editing. That thus increases productivity. Yet at the same time, I can be sure that I have the latest files and my data is protected. If I were to lose my laptop and I were to lose my mobile phone, well then, unfortunate how that may be, all I need to do is purchase another device and my data is still there. I have access to it and I can be quickly up and running within minutes. So get your critical business apps back up and running in minutes. So the same type of thought when it comes to our personal data on our laptop and our mobile device can happen on a server. Perhaps our organization is running a SQL database with all of our customers and some other information in it critical to our business. Well, being able to have that replicated in a secure environment that only our organization has access to, if that server were to go down or we were to lose it, well, again, we can be back up and running in just a few minutes as it fails over to perhaps a cloud-based solution. Many organizations are going only cloud. In fact, new organizations are building new apps and new solutions for their internal business processes and their customers. They're doing it cloud-based because of the savings in cost and the ability to have this protection of their data, knowing that it is available at any time. So, talking about the reliability of the cloud, you're offered a 99.9% uptime, which is many times quite more reliable than having a solution on-premise, because having a solution on-premise is great while everything is working, but when there's some failures, well, getting things back up and running sometimes can take quite a bit of an expense, and it can take time. So making sure that we have our systems are on servers that are redundant and it's replicated and it's in the cloud, then it gives us a larger guarantee that it's going to be up and running. In fact, with Office 365, it has a 99.9% uptime that's financially backed. We also want to have 24/7 support for business critical applications. If there's a problem, our business may be a 24/7 operation, maybe it's a global operation. Even still, we want to be able to have access to support any time of the day to make sure our data is there and that we can continue working. And having data backed up throughout the world so that if one location there was a problem, the internet goes down in the whole western part of the United States, well, if we have employees in other locations, they can still access data because it's based in the cloud. Another case study. It's time to really think about how we modernize our equipment. Protecting our data can happen in an almost automatic way when we upgrade to more modern technology, since most modern technologies have backup recovery built into it, especially when we think about cloud. Moving to a modern-based infrastructure, even moving to modern servers in our organization, Windows 2012, Windows 2016, That in itself gives us technology that makes it very easy for us to secure our data and to replicate it. With cloud servers, we can do more. We spend less. It's easy to scale up and down. It's easy for us to say, okay, we have 2 servers, now we need 3 servers because our business has grown, or during the summertime we do more business and more persons access the server, so we scale up to 3, but during the fall we scale down to 2. That type of flexibility is available with the cloud. We also can count on cloud services for reliability, for protecting our data in multiple locations, as I've mentioned quite a few times already. So, we've talked a bit about different ways to protect our data. We've talked about having our data secure by means of putting it in multiple locations. We've talked about having our data secure by having a virus protection system in place. We've talked about having our data secure by having controls in place. Who has access to it? Making sure that only the people who are the right persons have access to it. We've talked about keeping our data protected and secure by means of backups. We've talked about keeping our data protected and secure by means of disaster recovery, having things back up and running in a very short period of time. So, hope that the information that I've dispensed this morning was helpful to you. If you want more information about specific products or specific ways in which you can implement some of these suggestions, feel free to contact me. My email is dgentles@cloudfirstinc.com. But right now, you can also ask questions. I'm going to open it up, so if you see your chat window, you can ask questions in the window. And also stay tuned, as we will send you a link to the survey, as well as announce who our winner is of the 1-year subscription of Office 365. So while that is being prepared, please feel free to type in a question.